Hi, my name is Annika Gould, and my presentation is on expanding the mandate of international criminal law beyond crisis crimes. So I chose to examine ICL because there's been this swift fall from grace within the field. After the Nuremberg Trials in the tribunals for Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia, there was a sense that finally we had a mechanism for accountability and justice on a global scale. However, this sense of optimism over ICL has since faded, and it is now a clear academic consensus that we need reform. So ICL is criticized for three main pitfalls. First, racism. The core crimes as defined by ICL fall along racialized lines. Genocide, war, aggression, and other crisis crimes fall under ICL's mandate, yet those typical of global North nations don't. So grand corruption, kleptocracy, or neocolonialism. Second, illiberalism. In a haste to respond to crisis crimes, ICL overstretched human rights law into criminal law. So standards of fair labeling, fair warning, and culpability have not been met, but are instead overruled by political pressures. And third, complacency. A false sense of resolution from indictments gives ICL the ability to claim justice without really examining or persecuting the structures that actually enable crime. This perception of accountability upholds the status quo without really investigating any of the structure behind crime. So these critiques all touched on a skewed mandate within ICL, and I explore this remit further in my research question, and I ask, how can we adjust the mandate of ICL so that it actually addresses the largest contributors of criminality? So to answer my question, I decided to look at past jurisdiction and patterns of financing and wealth exchange. So I used discrepancies between indictments and then the crimes that were actually committed. And I ultimately argue that economic criminality aligns with crisis crimes, even though it remains unanswered within ICL. For my case study, I settled on using Milosevic's kleptocracy during the Yugoslav wars. It was the most cited example of economic criminality aligning with crisis crimes. And it was also appealing because kleptocracy and war contain multitudes of crimes within these larger umbrellas. When I went through indictments of the ICTY court records, time and time again, I would see evidence submitted on smuggling networks, embezzlement, and the high-profile elites that ran them. So if you could turn your attention to the map right here, I named three especially notable instances of economic criminality. So Milosevic colluded to traffic weapons with the Slovenian defense minister, Janez Janša, and ultimately 10 million in war profits were embezzled from this arrangement. He arranged with the Bosnian general known as Arkan for 30,000 USD payments per tanker of gas smuggled into Yugoslavian borders, and at his direction, his regime stripped assets from the state, laundering state funds to finance ethnic Serbian armies. So none of these arrangements actually arose in criminal proceedings in the ICTY, and from those findings, I settle on three conclusions. Number one, political and business elites sought to maintain wealth and power by inciting, enabling, and encouraging war crimes. Two, many kleptocrats went entirely unpunished, and no one went to trial for an economic crime. And three, given this, the symbiosis between economic and war crimes is not reflected in the scope of ICL. In sum, it is clear that ICL has arrived at a crossroads. Faith in international institution wavers, and that criticism is well-deserved. So given this, I argue the key to a functional, effective ICL lies in a mandate expanded to include economic crimes. Such a mandate would address the racialized exclusion of white-collar crimes, reach to a structural aspect of criminality, and in discouraging impunity, it would lessen the burden of criminal law to perform human rights law in a post-op manner. It's paramount that our justice system contextualizes crime within the systems that enable it, thus actually working to end criminal impunity. I argue that ICL fails in this mission and arguably creates more injustice than justice, so long as an uneven mandate reigns.